Hello everyone, welcome back to Equals. This is Max.
Hi everyone, this is Naf. Welcome to Equals.
Naf, we're back on the air again after a long summer. I think the last time, we were supposed to meet, we were going to walk my dog and you stood me up.
I know it's been a while, Max. I had to go to Ethiopia to look after my grandmother. That's why I disappeared on you.
Oh, your famous granny. We've talked about her before. She's incredibly old, isn't she?
Yeah, she's amazing. People ask me how old is she, and I just say over 100 because I don't know if it's 103, 104.
That's mad. I remember she was saying how she met Haile Selassie, and amazing. So what's news in Ethiopia then?
It's raining a lot, Max. And then inflation is also raining on us.
Nice, like that. When you say inflation is raining on you, what do you mean? I mean, is it really bad? I mean, are prices going up dramatically?
Yeah, I try to see my parents every 6 months, so I've been back and forth, and every 6 months, things are going up. I feel like I don't know how people are surviving here. Prices are doubling, if not tripling.
So give us an example. What kinds of things are we talking about?
I would say like cooking oil is a good example. So I don't know, maybe a year ago was 500 or something, and then it went up to 800, then 1,000. Right now it's 1,500, and I honestly don't know, as I said, how people are surviving.
And so just for a bit of context then, so I don't know, how much would a primary school or secondary school teacher earn a month then?
I would say on average like 6,000 or 7,000, because I'm thinking of my relative who teaches, second graders. And I know she earns around that 6,000 or 7,000. She teaches at a public school.
Wow. So with her entire salary for a month, she could buy 4 bottles of oil.
Yeah, I know. I know it's crazy.
How do people even survive? I mean, I just don't understand how life functions in such a situation.
Really tough. When I ask neighbors, they usually say to me, Naf, we just survive by the grace of God, because they know how much they earn and they don't know how they survive, month from month. So that's the situation right now.
Well, certainly economic hardship, good kind of link to the theme this month. But I mean, taking a step back a minute, we're back on the air, new season of Equals. And I think it's fair to say we're more organised than we've ever been before, which is not difficult because we're not very organised. But we do have kind of broad themes for the next few months. And in September, we're going to be looking at the relationship between trade unions and inequality in a couple of episodes, which is really exciting.
Really excited about this season, Max. We have a lot of exciting episodes, also amazing guests. Of the 2 episodes, the second one, which we're launching in a couple of weeks, is with trade unionists at the front line from the UK, South Korea, and Ukraine.
Yes, that's amazing. And that was one of the most inspiring interviews I've ever done on Equals. So that's in a couple of weeks, kind of frontline trade unionists. And then this week, also a fantastic interview with the General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation, the ITUC, a man called Luc Triangle. And he spoke to Equals about the relationship between trade unions and democracy in particular, and their campaign against oligarchy, against billionaires, against what they call the Billionaire Coup, which is a fantastic name for a campaign, which I wish we'd thought of. So should we get into that interview?
Really inspiring interview. Let's get into it.
Let's do that.
It's really great having you with us on Equals, Luc. So you came up through the trade unions in Belgium. Can you tell us about your personal journey? How did you become involved and why?
I started my trade union membership in the early 80s, I think in 1982. I came out of school, a trade union school actually. I did my civil service. I refused military service for valid reasons. And then I was unemployed for quite some time. And in that period, I engaged in youth committees in my hometown in Belgium. And at a certain moment, I was picked up to lead the youth department in my region. And that was my first actually paid job. So since I think 1984, I started with, first of all, some temporary contracts in the trade union movement in Belgium. And then I was recruited by the Metalworkers Trade Union as a trainer. And when in the 90s we got in European Works Council directive in 1994, I was a strong believer in European networks between workers' representatives, because this was the first tool we had in Europe where workers' representatives from different countries could connect. So I worked on that in the metal industry, and I also engaged myself in the European Metal Workers Federation. And in that way, I entered into the international work, first at European level, but then also later on at global level. And in 2011, I was asked to lead the European Federation for Textile Garment and Leather, which was also part of my home union experience or fields in Belgium. And in 2012, we created Industrial Europe, which was a merged organization between the European Metalworkers Federation, but also the Federation for Chemical, Mining and Energy sector and the textile. And in 2016, I became then the General Secretary of this organization. So the first 4 years were Deputy General Secretary from 2012 till 2016. And in 2016, I became General Secretary. And in 2023, I was called by the ITUC president and by some affiliates from the ITUC to take up the position of acting General Secretary at ITUC level, International Trade Union Confederation, which is the umbrella organization for all the national centers in the world. So it was a temporary mandate for 5 months, but then at the end, they asked me whether I could stay for the full mandate, which means another 4 years. So now I'm elected until November 2027, when our next Congress will take place. So that's a little bit my journey in the trade union movement. I think that, and that's the reason why I took the European and international road, is that trade unions are strong at national level and they need to have their bases at national level. But at the end of the day, our collective power is in the unity at global level, because we are the largest social movement in the world. We have now more than 200 million members in the ITUC, and if we use this power, no one can really stop us. And that's the strong belief I have.
That's a lot of members. I mean, that is potentially a hugely powerful force. Going back to when you were young, so what attracted you to the unions? I mean, what made you think as a young man, I think unions are the right thing, all those years ago in Belgium? I mean, here in the UK, we were just going through Thatcherism, and I remember those times were terrible for workers. Was there a similar thing going on in Belgium? Was there a real pushback on workers' rights?
Well, I was 21 or so when I joined the trade union as a member. Well, that was a period, early 80s, of a high youth unemployment. In that period, I think it was in 82 and in 84, we had two important youth demonstrations on a Sunday in Brussels, which I attended. And these were youth marches for work. So it was that reality that pushed me into the trade union movement, because there was no hope, there was no perspective for young people when they came out of school, when they went to the labor market. So there was a high rate of youth unemployment. So that was my personal motivation. Obviously, I was also involved at that time in the marches against nuclear armament when American missiles were coming to Europe. So also that was part of my motivation, because the trade unions were also very active in that peace movement in the early 80s, still today, by the way.
My earliest memories of marches, a campaign for nuclear disarmament with my mother in the early 80s. And I just remember the forest of legs, because I was quite small. When you take a step back now and you look at trade unions worldwide and you look at these 200 million workers that are part of the ITUC, what do you see as the link between trade unions and inequality? Well, we've lived through a period where inequality has grown in most countries in the world. What for you as leader of the ITUC is the connection between that and workers' power?
Well, we are indeed today faced with growing inequality and still growing inequality. So it's not getting better, it's getting worse. And trade unions, we have an agenda of working and fighting for more equality in the world. That starts at local level, but that goes to international level, global north, global south. So, and it's also about a fair distribution of the wealth that is created by workers and by people. What we have seen over the last decades, I think the last 30 years, the GDP in the world grew was multiplied with 4. But at the same time, we saw and we see that wages do not follow. So the GDP growth is not equally distributed because the labor income share in the GDP is declining year after year. That means GDP is growing, but workers don't grow at the same level. So that means others, individuals, shareholders, billionaires are picking in the majority of the wealth and that has been created over the last 20, 30 years. And I think that Oxfam is giving these numbers year after year, and they are very, very clear. The number of billionaires has grown every year. I think in 2023, and that these are the numbers from Forbes, 2,781 individuals, not even 3,000, owned altogether in 2023 $14.2 trillion US dollar. And that number is growing year after year. And the 50% poorest people in the world don't get anything more. So this growing inequality is something that we need to attack and that needs to change. And so workers need to get their fair share of the GDP growth and the wealth that they create themselves with their hands and brains in a workplace. We also need to make sure that countries can develop shoulder by shoulder. And that's also the inequality at global level that we see. We see a whole number of countries that don't have any means to invest in development. 70 countries at global level, approximately 70 countries are virtually bankrupt. They don't have any means to invest in education, but also not in climate change. I was recently, a few weeks ago, in a country like Pakistan. Well, 70% of the annual budget goes to the reimbursement of loans to the IMF and others. At the same time, 26 million kids don't have access to education. So because there is no way how they can invest in education when there is no money available in their annual budget. And furthermore, Pakistan was one of these countries in 2022 which has been affected strongly by climate change. They had these immense floods in Pakistan. And so to now rebuild those parts of the country, they have to take new loans. So this is also a sign of inequality because those countries that are affected most by the climate change are not the ones that have caused the climate urgency. And what we see also in international fora like the COP is that the willingness from those countries that have created the climate urgency, Europe, many parts of the global north, are not willing to pay for climate action in those countries where we see the climate urgency most. So, and this is the inequality that we see all over the world. It's about individual inequality. So people, where we see the gap is growing between billionaires and the majority of the other people, that's the individual inequality. But we see also the country inequality growing. This is for us our major agenda, working on this inequality, but in all its dimensions.
Love how you talked about inequality within countries, but also between countries, and also the importance of building this collective movement that is, a powerful trade union movement at the global level. And with regards to that, Luc, what is the current state of trade unions worldwide? What makes you optimistic?
Well, then I have to go back to another topic, which is currently one of our flagship campaigns, and that's democracy. We are fighting for democracy, and we are fighting for democracy that delivers to workers. And the reason why we do that is because we believe that the world that we want to create can only be created in a context of democracy and democratic values. And what we see today in the world is that more and more elected leaders coming in to democratic elections, they come in and the first thing what they do is actually attacking democratic values. And democratic values are for us the respect for human rights, the respect for gender rights, for women rights, for LGBTQ, equality, but also the freedom of speech, the freedom of press. But that also includes workers' rights and trade union rights. And what we see is that when these elected leaders come in, often authoritarian, extreme right driven, well, the first thing what they do is actually attacking trade unions. And the reason is very simple and very easy to understand, because we are the largest social movement defending democracy, promoting democracy, and promoting democratic values. So in that sense, we have to fight for democracy. We have to fight for our democratic values, because they are our umbrella under which workers' rights and trade union rights can be guaranteed. We have an index from 1 to 5 plus. Well, only 7 countries in total 151 where we have the index for, only 7 countries are still in index 1, which is the lowest and the best actually level. 51 countries are in 5 or in 5 plus. So that means 1 on 3 are in the heaviest violators of workers' rights and trade union rights. So in that sense, our campaign for democracy is not just a campaign for democracy and for democratic elections. It's about democratic values, because in that environment, we can only guarantee the respect of workers' rights and trade union rights.
We love your index. What does it mean to violate trade union rights? What does it look like? Could you maybe give us 1 or 2 examples? And what does it feel like for trade unionists on the ground all over the world?
It's, for example, the right to organize a trade union without ending up in prison. It's the right to do collective bargaining. It's the freedom of speech. It's also the freedom to organize a manifestation without ending up in jail, or even worse, to be killed. So these are what we call trade union rights. So how free are you in a country to do your trade union work without being threatened by the employer, without being hit by police forces, or without ending up in jail, or without even be killed? But what makes me optimistic is we continue to organize. We continue to organize more members in the trade union movement. Some countries, some regions are maybe having difficulties because of these threats that workers are a little bit scared to organize. But in many other countries, we see a growth. And we see also a growth in the new forms of work. So, for instance, in platform economy, we have examples and so on. So we try to also organize now in what I call non-traditional sectors, because we have always been strong in industry. We have always been strong in organizing traditional sectors. But now we also need to organize workers which are maybe not a workplace in a company or in an enterprise, but maybe from home or in other ways, or how they organize their income. I always say to my affiliates, if we organize ourselves collectively, if we use our collective power of 340 national organizations in 170 countries representing more than 200 million members, well, if you use that power, no one can stop us.
Oh, that definitely inspires me. Just recently, you guys launched we were a bit jealous because we thought this was a great name for a campaign. You talked about a billionaire coup in the global economy. Could you say a bit more what you mean by that? Why? Because we also associate coups with democracy and kind of at the other end. So is there a sense, why did you pick the word coup? Because I thought that was really, a really good idea and really interesting.
First of all, last year it was a campaign for democracy. The last months we are working on a campaign for democracy that delivers. Let me first explain that. Why are so many working people, even members of the trade union, voting for politicians that, once they are elected, are destroying democratic values, including workers' rights and trade union rights? The reason why is that over the last 30, 40 years, the traditional democratic parties have not delivered enough to working people, to the majority of the society. And that's why populist parties came up, extreme right parties came up, and they try to pick in that dissatisfaction by saying, okay, it's not your fault. It's the fault of migrants. It's the fault of asylum seekers. And they try to make them the cause of the fact that workers and people, the majority of the people feel or felt disappointed. But in any case, what I now just said is important to explain also why we go to the Take Back Democracy and Stop the Billionaire Coup campaign. The reason why we started that campaign is what we have seen in the United States over the last 6 months, 9 months, before the elections even. First of all, we have this growing inequality. We have this growing group of billionaires, which I explained earlier. And until, I would say, a year ago, they were mainly acting in the shadow of politics. We didn't see them often. But actually what changed over the last 9 months is that they came out of the shadows and they jumped even on the political stage, literally. You need to ask the question, who is really in power today in the White House? Because this president can normally not be re-elected anymore in 3 years' time. The constitution doesn't allow that in the US. People can not re-elect him. That's the power of democracy still. But the ones that we cannot kick out are the billionaires. And actually, the billionaires are keeping the strings today of that president. So in 3-4 years' time, the president might maybe disappear, but the billionaires are there to stay. And then the question is that we are going for the first time, in my opinion, in the recent history to what I call even a fascist world order, where the democracy might elect maybe politicians, but the real power is not anymore in the hand of these politicians, but is in the hand of the billionaires. And these people are there to stay because they are not democratically elected. And that's the reason why we say, okay, take back democracy and stop the billionaire coup, because there is actually a coup going on of a number of billionaires that actually want to control the society. And making again the link to our members, why do they elect these politicians? We have launched our campaign also to analyze the 10 steps, the rule book of these billionaires with these politicians. We called it the Trump-Musk model or the Trump-Musk ecosystem. What is typical for them? And then the point is there no alternative? And we believe, and we are strongly believing that there is absolutely an alternative, but we have to explain that to our members. We have to explain to our members, to people, ordinary people in the society, yes, there is an alternative for the reality of Trump and Musk. There is an alternative for the growing inequality in the world, but it's a political choice. So if we want to change that, we need to get rid of those politicians that try to destroy our democracy with the help and assistance of billionaires. So that's why we have launched this campaign, because if you look to our material, it's also a kind of handbook and manual to our member organization that can be used on how to fight back and how to explain to workers that those politicians are not a solution for their problems. We need to make other solutions, and we need to have other politicians than those totalitarian far-right politicians.
Incredible campaign, and very timely. That is so much needed right now. So, Luc, I think you have already touched upon it. How can we fight back? Because as you have already said, the richest have captured our political and economic systems. And how can we fight against that?
Well, first of all, I think trade unions need to continue to organize. Our strength, our power lies in our members. The more members we have, the stronger we are. And that's the first thing we need to do. Secondly, we have to unite the trade union movement, and we are united. But we also sometimes have challenges internally on certain topics where we maybe not always agree with each other, where we disagree. Organizing together with unity and then using your collective power. As I said, largest social movement, the trade unions in the world. And if we use our collective power, no one can stop us. But it's not only about trade unions. I mean, there are so many groups like Oxfam, where we have actually a common agenda. I use the material from Oxfam every year, and Oxfam use our material. So building coalitions between those organizations, between those global movements that have the same agenda is actually the way forward. Because if we do it alone, we are strong. If we do it together, we are much stronger. And then, let's also learn lessons from the way our American colleagues currently are fighting back. First of all, we need to use the legal system. We need to use courts. When illegal measures are taken, we need to go to court. I think the fact that the rule of law is still there to a certain extent should encourage us and use the rule of law, use international law, use courts to attack measures and initiatives that are taken by politicians which are, in our views, illegal. So that's one element. Secondly, we need to continue to work with those politicians that we might need to have another political agenda in the future. Do we accept that the billionaires are growing, that their wealth is growing, and that they don't pay taxes? So, for instance, taxation. Then we need courageous politicians that can indeed set up a fair taxation system to also finance the world we want, because we know that we have an alternative. We know that there is a better world possible, and we know that this better world is not just something virtual or unrealistic. No, it is realistic, and there is money available. Take from these billionaires. invest less in armament instead of more, because military spending is growing year after year. Again, let's have fair taxation. Then we can generate all the financial resources we need to create the world we believe in, the better world, the world which is more equal, where everybody has education, where there is social protection for all, where there is no child labor anymore. So that's also part of our agenda where we need to fight on together. And then the third level, where our American colleagues are also working on, is integrating ourselves into communities. Because we are organizing workers in workplaces first, but we also should organize workers and people in the communities, because it's not enough to approach people in the workplace. We need to go into the villages. We need to go into the communities and make our message clear. Yes, there is an alternative. Let's work on that alternative. And this is our plan. This is the way how we believe that it should be done. So integrating ourselves even in communities which are maybe today very much driven by extreme right or far right or nationalistic or populistic agendas from political parties, let's go into these communities as well. Let's talk to people. Let's try to convince them for another agenda. So these are three levels: courts, politics, and communities, on which our American colleagues work very hard today.
I can see why you're the head of the ITUC, that you're very inspiring. So thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to cover that we didn't?
No, I think that's fine. Thank you for asking me the questions, because for me, it's, it's the same for you. Working for Oxfam is the same as working for the trade union movement. We are all convinced about, and we have a mission. And so for me, it's not about the position. It's about the mission and how can we contribute to the mission that we all share on what kind of world do we want. And I can only repeat that the ITUC is absolutely willing to do much more with Oxfam, is willing to do much more with others as well, Amnesty International and so on.
Thank you very much. That was a wonderful, wonderful interview, really inspiring. So, Naf, what was a highlight for you?
I really loved it, Max. I really found it inspiring. When Luc was talking about, that they have 200 million members and that it's the largest social movement, it really made me realize, this is it. Like, this is the solution, because we need a collective movement, collective power to address all these different issues, like from human rights to social justice, climate justice. And the reason I actually started thinking about that, Max, look at this summer or whatever you are, winter. I feel like people experienced extreme weather events, whether you're talking about flooding or, heat waves across different parts of the world. But in terms of climate action, we're not seeing that, which tells you that our political and economic system is captured. So how can we fight against that? So when I was listening to Luc talk about the power, the collective power, I was thinking we need something like the trade union to make a change.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one of the great things about unions is they're built by and represented by and constructed by working people all over the world, and they do represent millions and millions of people, and I think that's so powerful. I loved the connection he made between that and democracy, which I hadn't really thought of before. That, of course, people think of trade unionists of quite rightly fighting for economic rights, for higher wages, better conditions, against mistreatment at work. But they're also a core part of democracy. Their ability to speak out and to represent the interests of the majority, that's one of the first things that's attacked in a democracy, because the rich and the powerful, they can't stand it when workers get organized. And you can see that from authoritarians and billionaires all over the world. So our Davos paper for January next year, which we're in the middle of writing at the moment, is all about this relationship between economic inequality and political inequality, and how the economically rich become politically rich very quickly. So they use their money to buy more influence in politics, but at the same time, the economically poor can rapidly become politically poor, losing their voice, losing their influence. And one of the main ways to stop that happening is unionism and organising. So yeah, I thought that was brilliant. And And a great link, I think, to the next episode, because we're interviewing 3 people in one episode, which I think is a first, and it's 3 amazing people, isn't it? Unionists from different countries all over the world.
Really inspiring interview from South Korea, Ukraine, UK. They're all faced with, some of them are faced with war, some of them are faced with repression. I would highly recommend that everyone listens to this episode.
So that's the next episode, everyone. Again, on unions on the front line, and that will be in a couple of weeks. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Luc, and please tell all your friends about Equals and the new season. Lots of fascinating episodes coming out in the next few months. Lots of famous names and some amazing frontline activists too. So listen in, everyone.
Have an amazing time. Until next time.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.